Well, hello.
Well, hi there.
I'm Dan.
I'm Lisa.
And welcome back to Siblings in Zion. And today's episode is a little different. We're going to have a book report
Yeah.
of sorts. So I'm going to turn the time over to Sister Lisa so she can tell us all about what she learned from this book called
21 Lessons for the 21st Century
by
Yuval Noah Harari.
Also author of Sapiens and Homo Deus.
Not Homo Deus.
Not Homo Deus. And I have Sapiens. I have yet to read it, but I'm very much looking forward to it. But this is his most recent book. Yes?
Yes.
You just finished it not too long ago and really wanted to use it to share with the audience.
Yes, I did.
Which I fully endorse. Let's have it.
Oh, let's have it. Yeah, I kind of feel like since we're not really talking about anything Mormon-y, that it's kind of what we started doing at the end, but like expanded for the whole episode, you know?
Sharing, writing, and useful information from outside of what Christians and religious folk would go to the scriptures for.
Exactly.
Right?
Sapiens is a brief history of the last 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Homo Deus is the future. And this is right now.
Right now.
Which was really helpful for me because I can get really overwhelmed by all that there is to know that's already happened.
Yeah. As much as we can know.
Yeah. Which is a lot.
Yeah. At least we think so.
Right. And mostly it's about ourselves. But then you get anxious about the future and how dystopian that can be.
That definitely happens.
In most predictions.
Yeah.
And so it was really helpful to read a book that's focusing on this century and the problems we're facing globally.
As a species.
As a species.
And the Earth itself, I would imagine.
Yeah. And if there's anything we can do about that and how to prepare for that.
Yeah.
So it was really nice to read a book that addressed every issue that I face in my own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And to read someone as brilliant as Dr. Harari address it and explain it in a way that is so accessible to anyone who reads it, I feel like. Because he's not speaking at a super high overarching level.
Yeah.
That's like, what are you saying? There's so many words.
Big words.
And I gotta look them all up before I can understand what you're saying to me.
Big words, man.
There's too many big ones. And it was just really nice to be able to read it and completely understand what he was saying.
Yeah.
I feel like you're on the same level as him.
He's a Israeli historian and professor in the Department of History at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Yes. So he is currently living in Israel.
Yes.
Which is so cool. And like watching videos of him, he's just such like a nice, like...
He is a very nice gentleman.
Little guy. He seems so sweet. So, as you can see, I have all of these sticky notes in here. And I tried to save the sticky note for something that was particularly insightful.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of blew my mind. So obviously that happened a lot. This was sparing, mind you. And then I laid out in bullet points like what my favorite parts were. Okay, I'll try not to read too much of it though.
Yeah, could you?
Could you just, people can read.
Yeah, people read.
People have brains and such. The first part I sticky noted was on page 6. He's explaining like the layout of the entire book as a whole. And he says in the last part, he gathers together a general look at what life might look like in an age where all of our old stories have collapsed.
Mm.
Reading this paragraph, I just felt like he was talking about my life in a microcosm, but he's talking about the whole world. So he says, I gather together the different threads and take a more general look at life in an age of bewilderment when the old stories have collapsed and no new story has emerged so far to replace them. Who are we? What should we do in life? What kinds of skills do we need? Given everything we know and don't know about science, about God, about politics, and about religion, what can we say about the meaning of life today?
Mm.
That's everything I care about right there.
I'm in.
I'm in. I was hooked. I mean, after leaving Mormonism, those are pretty much
Right.
all your questions.
Yeah.
Because you
pretty big
thought
ones.
you had the answers to all of those.
Oh, yeah.
Politics, Republican.
You were certain of it.
Oh,
And all those poor unfortunate souls out there thought that they did, but no.
yeah. So then you don't have the meaning of life.
Yeah.
And you got to figure something else out. And he does a really good job of pasting together a comforting reality using science. Okay, so before things got comforting, things got really terrifying. Actually, while reading this book. And
Freaked out, man.
I got really freaked out because he brings up things I've never thought about before.
Yeah.
So he dives into things like the rise of biotech and infotech.
Yeah.
And brings your attention to what companies like Google are doing.
Yeah.
That are taking your information.
Which is something that we almost try not to think about and try to ignore the reality of what that actually means.
Because I sure don't. You probably have a way better idea of what that means before I even tell you what he said.
Probably, but I should still take it more seriously. But then the thought is, well, I don't have anything to hide, so whatever.
Exactly. That's what most people's reaction or response is.
But there's plenty about me and my everyday life and habits that gets taken from my interaction online and saved. And if you want an even deeper dive into the possibility of what that information could be used for, there is an episode of the podcast, which is now called Everywhere You Go is Bullshit, on the topic of the sentient world simulation, where it's possible that all this data from us is being collected and then used to simulate the world's reaction to events. All your personal information and habitual data is collected, and then they can run a simulation about what you would do and what collectively people would do, say in a situation like we're in right now at the end of March of 2020 in this pandemic.
Exactly.
It's pretty creepy.
It is. And I wasn't as freaked out by it until I read the first couple chapters of this book, because my response was, I don't have anything to hide. Who cares if they watch me? And
we trade off convenience for sharing this.
I mean, I have Instagram.
Yeah.
And I sign up willingly for them to take my information.
Yeah.
And my
your
data.
Photos. Basically, they could use your photos for whatever they want to.
And that's not even the scariest part to me.
No. They know what you're looking at and what you like, and they use it to sell
my
things,
decisions.
Try to sell things to you.
Even more than that, though, I mean, I'm pretty good at ignoring advertisements.
Yeah. I think that generally speaking, it doesn't really have much of an effect on me.
Right. It is creepy.
Yeah. I see it working, though. I definitely see it working.
I mean, to think, oh, I was just talking about that. And then see it pop up.
Yeah. So, yeah, I love how these things will simulate discussion about it, because when I had a Google Pixel,
oh yeah,
I started to see it more. And so much so, I mean, this cannot be a coincidence. I was talking with a couple of friends, and my friend, who is standing probably 5-6 feet away from me, says something about flip-flops or sandals. And within the next day, probably even that evening, in my Google News feed was something about sandals, which I have never inquired about. It had to have been accessing the microphone and analyzing that for keywords.
Yeah.
And then one evening, we were at a table with our mother. Were you there for this?
I was. We were playing cards.
Yeah. She and our other sister were somewhere in like a wildlife safari where a deer could stick its head through the window.
Yeah, they were talking about being at the wildlife safari.
And I opened my phone as it was looking that up and showing an image of it.
It's fucking creepy.
I don't know how I did it, but I caught it in the act. I was like, fuck that, man.
Yeah. And
so I started turning off permissions for the microphone, and then it would bug me every day, multiple times a day. If you want, things won't work right if you don't have that microphone on. It's like, well, then fuck you.
This is a stupid decision you've made.
So I got rid of the Google Pixel.
Consequently, neither of us have that anymore.
Right.
So he says humans were always far better at inventing tools than using them wisely.
Great point.
Because we've got all of this technology. And I don't know how to make this.
No.
I barely know how to use it to its full capacity.
Yeah.
People drive cars. No one can make a fucking car. Like single-handedly.
Very few people know how to put it together.
I mean, most people don't even know how to fix it.
Right.
Yet we operate these things that are just in our lives.
Yeah.
And we just use them unwittingly.
And the people who do know how to make them know that and make them in such a way that dum-dums can use them, at least to their intended purpose overall.
He ultimately makes the point that humans don't even really understand how their own mechanics work, if you want to use that metaphor.
Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts.
There are tons. And we are not conscious of the decisions that we make 24/7. We don't always know why we make certain decisions, what motivates us, let alone other people. And eventually, computers will have enough data about us that they can make better decisions for us than we can make for ourselves, because they will have so much more access to our habits and can synthesize them and process them in a way that will be more reliable than what we could do for ourselves. And therefore, we will learn to trust them and to willingly relinquish our desire to choose, because it has proven over and over again that it can do better for me than I can for me.
Yeah.
In every category. And that terrifies me.
Well, you and I, at this point in time, having lived long enough into our adult years, we think of that and say, not me. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
But even people born in the last 20 years have seen so much more growth and implementation of this kind of technology.
Babies
born into it
with iPads.
They don't know what it's like to not have a cell phone or a computer or a tablet or a computerized watch.
Yeah.
And then, the frog in the boiling water, it keeps growing and growing and growing until we're just always connected, always giving. And then eventually, oh yeah, sure, I'll do whatever this thing says.
Exactly. Because it's easier.
I can't imagine that being the reality for people in the future.
And that's why it's so scary, because it's so accurate.
The only hope I have is that people who do fear that and don't want that raise kids to feel the same way, so that at least in some way that continues, that there's still an alternative.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we got out of the mostly religious culture.
Because we had access to an alternative.
Yeah.
You were my alternative.
And yeah, in this personal way, but I mean, religion used to be the only option.
Ever present. In a
monarchy.
Right. The other point he makes is that the people who make these revolutions in biotechnology and information technology are not the ones who are aware of how it's going to affect us personally and politically. Their job is just to make it.
Yeah.
Not to decide how we use it.
And making it for sometimes a more utilitarian purpose and a more seemingly just useful purpose than it will ultimately be used for.
Exactly.
People didn't make computers in order to collect data and manipulate people. They made computers to do complicated tasks for most humans.
Right.
At the time, there was data correlation and simple or more complicated math and just data storage rather than collection of people's humanity, essentially.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, technology, very dystopian. He makes reference to Black Mirror and how
great show.
Terrifying. It's so good, so terrifying. But he makes reference to like how science fiction often pays attention to the wrong things.
Yeah.
That we're not aware of what will actually be impacting us. We're so worried about like our consciousness being put into a cookie that like we're not aware that like
cookie.
Whatever. Do you remember that Black Mirror episode with like the little egg?
Consciousness cookies.
Oh God. Like
the egg. Oh yeah.
Yeah. That you can download it and it can do things for you on its own. And we're so afraid of things like that, but that's so left field from what is actually on our doorstep already.
Yeah.
So that was terrifying. Woke me up a little bit to what's around the corner. Page 27. This was just another paragraph that I read through the lens of what it's like to lose your religious faith. You know, he says, we are still in the nihilist moment of disillusionment and anger. And I feel like in the last year, that's where I was. This period of you've lost it and you're upset about it and you feel like nothing matters anymore.
Yeah.
After people have lost faith in the old stories, but before they have embraced a new one. So what next? He says the first step is to tone down the prophecies of doom and switch from panic mode to bewilderment. Panic is a form of hubris. It comes from the smug feeling that I know exactly where the world is heading. Down. Which I thought was really interesting because I tend to be kind of a pessimistic person. And I've never thought about it as that having an undercurrent of I'm so sure that I'm right.
Yeah.
And that the world is meaningless and bleak.
And that's the way it is.
And that's that.
So.
Everything sucks.
Yeah.
So
It's
go
terrible.
fuck yourself. Like,
Fuck off.
and if you're happy about it, then you're an idiot. But bewilderment, like curiosity, he talks about it as being a more humble approach to life instead of feeling like the apocalypse is upon us and like freaking everyone out, that you can just try and understand what's going on instead rather than jumping to your own conclusions, which is really helpful for someone who's left a cult.
Yeah, definitely.
Because curiosity is like a healthy upward, I don't know why I want to use the word energy, but like
That makes sense.
it's just, it makes you happier.
It can, yeah.
Yeah. It's just a more positive emotion, I feel like, to take. And that's something I'm trying to do.
The pursuit of happiness that's the value. Because happiness is fleeting.
Right.
Everything is fleeting. So being more active in whatever it is that you're seeking, searching for, trying for, the value is the journey. Because you should never think that you have it all figured out. You 100% don't.
Never.
That's why people want religion. So have a leader at the top who is telling you this is the way it is and you can trust me and you can live your life based on what I'm saying. Even though I'm going to contradict most of the people who have said the same thing before me. Some prophets got it a little wrong. We're going to fix that now.
Bring him up.
Not a great man.
Not a great guy. I don't really want to read his biography or anything.
It's in my queue.
Okay, well, maybe I will. I mean,
Well.
probably will, honestly. Page 94. Google wants to reach a point where we can ask it anything and get the best answer in the world. That's what they're aiming for. And I didn't realize it until
guess
he
that
put
always
it in
has-
that black and white.
Yeah, I guess it always has been the aim.
Yeah.
To type in what you're looking for and get the absolute, by whatever metric, best result. But that still requires humanity because it's the best result because more people found it useful. More people
That's true.
shared that and then more people went to it and then it climbed in relevant results.
Statistically, sure, but it removes you from your own. Because you're asking, based on what you know about me, based on what you know about cars, including my habits and my views on Middle Eastern politics, what's the best car for me?
Yeah.
You know,
If it can tailor it that well to you.
if it can give us a good answer to that and we learn to trust it, then we're going to start asking it, who should we marry? And all of those huge questions.
That seems...
What job should I have? And I know it seems far-fetched, but like it's easy to see how we could learn to relinquish all control.
I mean, we are well on our way.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And we think it's nothing, our personal data. We're so willing to give it away, but it's actually probably the most valuable thing you have.
And I don't think it's so much that we don't care. It's that often we don't know
It's
that we're doing
ignorance.
it. Who's reading every terms and conditions list
Oh, we're
that
agreeing.
you're presented with?
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
I just want to use it. So
Agreed.
who knows what's in there?
Yeah, it just, from those chapters, I just finally understand the big deal about data. Like, I get it now. I get the picture, but now I know what's at stake.
Yeah.
I saw the sign, and it opened up my eyes.
You just nonchalantly drop that out there.
Page 150. This one kind of pertains, not kind of, it pertains to politics. With a globalized world that we live in, it's important to elect presidents who have a global interest.
True.
And he says...
Not America first.
We all know who has that slogan. He says, Yuval Noah Harari says, when the next elections come along and politicians are imploring you to vote for them, ask these politicians 4 questions. If you are elected, what actions will you take to lessen the risks of nuclear war? What actions will you take to lessen the risks of climate change? What actions will you take
Fake news
to regulate disruptive technologies such as AI and bioengineering? And finally, how do you see the world of 2040? What is your worst case scenario and what is your vision for the best case scenario? Because if these people don't talk about these things, that can't articulate an answer to these questions or even understand these questions, don't vote for them.
That's great, because Donald Trump would not have much to say of any
He won't even be
substance.
alive in 2040.
I mean, that seems very unlikely. Fake news.
I thought that was a really nice reminder, especially in this election year, because things are looking a little bit bleak for our candidate of choice. And I told myself, even if the candidate is not the person who could beat the person you dislike, vote for them because you like them, not because of their possibility to win against someone else. You know, that doesn't make any sense. Because then you're not getting anything better.
If so many people are worried that they have to vote for who they, for some reason, think has the better chance instead of voting for who they want. But if all of those people voted for who they want...
Exactly.
Then we might just get who we want.
And then we can have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Because we're all afraid that it's not going to work. So we're like, oh, well, what's going to work?
Yeah.
But if we all just did it, then it would work.
Voting for what you really want just might work.
What? 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 No. That's not democracy.
So many games we have to play.
It's really silly. On page 142, I wrote, global warming isn't an isolated event. Nationalism can't solve it. Oh, he just talks a lot about nationalism and the drawbacks of that as a political system.
There's a lot of it.
And that it's probably even more dangerous in the context of climate change than of nuclear war. Because the
Could be.
island of Tahiti, they could be doing everything perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But until the US of A get their act together...
Hey, you don't talk about my country like that.
It doesn't matter what they do.
Yeah.
Because we will overshadow them. So it's not every man for himself. Because our actions are directly impacting other nations.
It seems like...
Because it's a world.
It seems like people imagine this force field around their territory, where what's happening over there doesn't necessarily affect me here, even though we all have the atmosphere above us. There's no borders in the sky.
No.
If pollution is rampant in China, it will eventually be a problem other places.
Like the 14 countries that border China.
Yeah. Or even us.
Across the ocean.
Yeah.
We're only worried about what's happening at home, which is really unfortunate.
You know, home is not just your piece of land divided by lines on a map.
Yeah, that's an illusion.
It's all Earth.
Yeah. So Bernie 2020.
Yep. Please?
Please, if there ever was a God. Page 183. Oh, so in this chapter, he talks about immigration.
Okay.
and how that's also an effect of globalization.
Mm-hmm.
He makes two really important points that I think countries could learn a lot from. There are some countries that are doing amazing with their immigration policies.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you agree with immigration rights or not, I feel like these two things are really important to keep in mind. It's happening, whether you like it or not.
It's been happening. That's the only reason this country exists.
Exactly.
That is something that I just cannot understand, how people are like, yeah, but this is my country.
Yeah.
And I don't want these outsiders coming in here. That's exactly how this
But I want
happened in the
Chinese
first
takeout
place.
tonight.
Yeah. Listen, I love burritos.
As much as the next
and I love
motherfucker.
chow mein. But I also like hot dogs. And I don't need to like those people. Okay? They're just going to take our jobs.
Oh.
Yeah, we took all the land from the people who were here before.
So let's not get into that. He says, first, it would be wrong of any government to force large-scale immigration on an unwilling local population.
Okay.
Because absorbing immigration is a difficult, long-term process.
Mm-hmm.
And to successfully integrate immigrants, you must have the support and cooperation of the local population.
Yep.
The one exception to this rule is that countries are obliged to open their borders to refugees escaping death in a neighboring country, even if the local population doesn't like it, like Turkey and Syria.
Should be pretty basic.
It should. But if your
what
country...
if it was you?
Exactly. And if your country is so unwilling to cooperate with this influx of new people,
yeah,
that's not going to do those new people any good. It's going to make their situation even worse.
Good.
He says, second, those citizens have a right to oppose immigration. They should realize that they still have obligations towards foreigners, whether they're in your country or not. We are living in a global world, and whether we like it or not, our lives are intertwined with the lives of people on the other side of the planet. Mm-hmm. They grow our food, they manufacture our clothes, they might die in a war fought for our oil prices, and they might be the victims of our lax environmental laws.
Yeah.
We ought not to ignore our ethical responsibilities to people just because they live far away.
Yeah.
Immigration, I feel like, is a really difficult concept for a lot of people because it's not something that they can immediately see. It's a really abstract thing. And unless they're immediately interacting with those people,
mm-hmm.
they're just thinking about it in the mass of me and them. And I don't want them near me.
Yeah. Because I have a preconceived notion of who they are and what they do and what they want. And I don't want that.
No.
Okay?
I don't want it.
And that's not what I want?
No.
Not in my country.
Not in my country.
Actually, don't really know shit.
Nope, you don't know nothing. Anyway, so immigration. Complex topic.
Yes.
But very important. Ooh, ethics before the Bible.
Ooh.
This was really good.
That sounds really good.
It was really good. Oh, this sticky note is on this entire chapter.
Cool.
He just makes a lot of really good points about how you don't need Christianity to be a good person.
Yeah.
And he uses like these really cute examples of monkeys. Oh, he says in chimpanzee bands, dominant members are expected to respect the property rights of weaker members.
Mm.
He says a pygmy chimpanzee male called Kidogo lived in the Milwaukee County Zoo, and he had a heart condition that made him like really feeble and confused.
Oh.
And when he first got to the zoo, he couldn't orient himself and he didn't understand the instruction of like the caretakers,
mm-hmm.
the humans. And so when the other chimpanzees realized what was wrong with him, they like intervened and started to help him. And they would take him by the hand and like lead him where he needed to go. And when he got lost, he would make like distress sounds and one of the apes would like run to help him. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Like apes.
Yeah.
I mean, even before Christianity,
yeah, they don't know who
people
Jesus Christ
had
is.
ethical laws. Like it's just a natural part of our DNA.
It does seem to be, as long as it's supported an intrinsic thing.
Yeah.
I recognize you are very similar to me.
Yeah.
If not the same. So if you are having trouble, and especially if you are in my purview, if you're involved with me.
My plight.
Yeah.
Help me.
Your survival, your enjoyment, your happiness, your health is connected to mine.
Right. Your kindness is valuable to both of our survival.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that I need to be told to do.
Right.
By a prophet of God.
Right. Because it exists where language doesn't.
Exactly. That was so beautiful. Wow.
And I think we talked about this before. Like, really, all you and I are doing right now are making noises with our mouths that we can interpret. So, the chimpanzee is making a distress call that is interpreted somehow.
Yeah.
They don't need syllables and symbol representation,
right,
to understand that
tone
basic stuff
and that body language. Yeah. I mean, you could tell a lot from just like looking someone in the eye.
Totally.
And whether you speak the same language or not, you can understand emotion.
Yeah.
One quote I wrote down is, morality, in fact, has deep evolutionary roots predating the appearance of humankind by millions of years.
Millions. Well, how is that possible? Because the Earth is only
it's only 6,000 years old. That's silly. Oh, he also really crushes monotheism. He just shits on it.
Let's have it.
Oh. He says monotheism did little to improve the moral standards of humans.
Yeah, it complicated things quite a bit.
Yeah, the subsection is called The Birth of Bigotry.
Mm-hmm.
He says, do you really think Muslims are inherently more ethical than Hindus just because Muslims believe in a single God while Hindus believe in many gods? Were Christian conquistadors more ethical than pagan Native American tribes? What monotheism undoubtedly did was to make many people far more intolerant than before, thereby contributing to the spread of religious persecutions and holy wars.
Yeah.
Because polytheists are open to the idea that there's more than one truth, that there's more than one angle, that there's multiple ways to get to this thing that you're looking for. And then once you introduce monotheism, you're like, this is the only way. This is the only truth.
Yeah. This is the only God.
This is the only God, and these are the only things you can do to get to heaven. And everything outside of that is wrong.
Wrong.
And that is where you set people up for hatred.
Yeah.
And
because
divisiveness.
if you're not on my side,
you're on the wrong side.
You might as well be against me.
I never had thought about it that way before. How separating monotheism is.
Yeah, that's pretty much the whole idea.
And
true believers.
I think it's going to be so unifying. The whole world can come to believe in this one God.
And if you don't, I might just blow you up.
And we'll just kill you for it. That's really
Because that's what our God wants.
Yeah. That's charity and Christ-like love right there.
If you don't believe, you might as well be dead. So we'll take care of that for you.
This God requires universal obedience. So
sorry.
So get on the bandwagon or we're going to shoot you off of
Ejected. You're out.
Get out of here. I mean, like, in an equation, monotheism equals less tolerant. It had, I've never put it together like that before.
I mean,
it's synonymous.
Just to speak of our own upbringing on that, really, how tolerant are Mormon people who tout themselves as being, and are usually given the description of being nice people.
Yeah. Oh, those Mormons.
A lot of judgment.
So much for the stupidest
things. Even
within
their own communities. They're constantly judging and projecting. Also the inherent racism in the doctrine. Yeah.
Monitoring.
Yes. Oh yeah, a bunch of tattletales.
Where are her garments?
I don't see any garment lines on those shoulders. So, well, guess we know. Guess we know who's the better one here, don't we?
Oh, I'm sorry. How many times do you go to the temple every month? What was that number again?
Oh,
Well, I'm just saying I haven't seen my husband all week because he's the bishop.
Take that, Sister
The worse
Jensen.
your marriage is, the better you're in with God, okay? Anyway, page 242. Oh, this is a nice quote. This boils down to the idea that people afraid of losing their truth are more violent. It's kind of a continuation of this idea that monotheism is more dividing. It makes you less tolerant, and people who are afraid of losing where they are less willing to engage with you in a, civilized, not civilized, but like calm, rational manner, because they feel like they have so much to lose. It's really scary because you're holding on to something that doesn't stretch very far.
Yeah.
And they don't give you a lot to work with.
Right.
Within it. He says it takes a lot of courage to fight biases and oppressive regimes, but it takes even greater courage to admit ignorance and venture into the unknown.
That's true.
I thought that was so beautiful. So for anyone who feels like they need a little bit of encouragement or congratulations for how far they've come.
Yeah. It's the much harder thing to say, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah.
What else could there be?
Mm-hmm.
What if I really admit to myself that I don't really know and that I could be wrong?
That is the line that you have to cross.
It really, really baffles me that some people, they will be so quick to say that somebody else is definitely wrong, even though they have every conviction that they do about something else for no more evidence to be able to show you.
Just a feeling.
That they're definitely wrong. But there's no way that I am wrong about this. There's no way that Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet. That God doesn't hear and answer prayers. That paying my tithing doesn't give me blessings. There's no way that I'm wrong about that.
Those windows, they're open.
What?
Because the promise is that if you pay your tithing, that the windows of heaven will open so much that you will not have room to receive it. Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. If we think we know something, we shouldn't be afraid of doubting our opinions and checking again.
Yeah. I mean, until the end.
That's science.
Never be completely certain.
No.
Because what reason really do you have for that?
Fear of the unknown can paralyze us more than any tyrant. People throughout history worried that unless we put all our faith in some set of absolute answers, human society will crumble. Yeah,
and the more time goes on, I think that becomes less and less of a valid stance.
Yeah. How weak are we if we think that?
Well, I think the real
fear.
The real fear is for the weakest among us.
Yeah.
If they don't have that assurity.
Yeah.
And they don't have quite the same consideration or desire and openness to use their intellect.
Yeah.
To find the reason to be good without an all-seeing eye.
Yeah. An enforced.
That could be,
set of rules.
That could be a problem.
Yeah, just like you said, that seems less of a valid argument. He says, in fact, modern history has demonstrated that a society of courageous people willing to admit ignorance and raise difficult questions is usually not just more prosperous, but also more peaceful than societies in which everyone must unquestioningly accept a single answer.
Yeah.
Questions you cannot answer are usually far better for you than answers you cannot question.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. One sentence just like summed up all of Mormonism.
I mean, how many times in Christianity, but I think especially in Mormonism, is the idea of meekness and humbleness and being submissive, just circumventing your own thoughts. I mean, that's your problem. You got to let go of that and just let the prophet guide you, the scriptures guide you, and listen for Heavenly Father's Spirit whispering to you.
Let the Holy Spirit guide.
The meek will inherit the earth.
Let him teach us what is true.
And there's the first hymn of the evening.
He will testify of Christ. Light our minds with heaven's view. Okay. In a similar vein, page 249, he says, don't trust those who cannot admit ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
As we come to make the most important decisions in the history of life, I personally would trust more in those who admit ignorance than in those who claim infallibility. If you want your religion, ideology, or worldview to lead the world, my first question to you is, what was the biggest mistake your religion, ideology, or worldview committed?
Mm-hmm.
What did it get wrong? If you cannot come up with something serious, I, for one, would not trust you.
Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest mistake Mormonism ever made was?
Oh, man. The biggest?
You're like, what a joke.
There's so many.
Isn't even a question.
There's so many. I mean, the real obvious one, to their own detriment. I mean, the first thing, and if we're thinking about ethics and morals, is to exclude people of a non-white skin from receiving the benefits that are touted as the most special and unique from God. They can't have them because of some curse through truly no fault of their own. They didn't choose or decide who to be born to, where to be born, under what conditions, that they ended up with a different skin color than the prophet and most people of the religion. And to sew that in to the, is it the keystone or the cornerstone of the religion, the Book of Mormon?
The Book of Mormon is the keystone. Jesus Christ is the cornerstone.
Wow. And that is sewn into that book. It's a pretty big theme.
Yeah. Whiteness equals purity.
Yeah. And darkness, the opposite.
That's a good answer to that question.
It's pretty dumb. And they try to distance themselves from it, but they can't erase it from the book. It's just in there.
There is that one verse that's like, black and white, bond and free, both male and female. All are invited to come into Christ. It's like the only thing in there.
But the promise is, if you are valiant and righteous, you will be relieved of this curse of darkness on your skin. That's fucking insane.
It's so sad.
And it's a little bit morbid, but when you really think about it, remove our skin from our bodies and we all look the same.
Well, yeah.
Continue going, we all just are skeletons.
Yep.
Bones.
It's just pigment.
Yeah.
Or lack thereof.
And anthropology seems to point to, at some point, black skin was ubiquitous. Yeah. This is something that was adopted. It's not God-given from the beginning. Adam and Eve, what the fuck are we talking about? but say Adam and Eve were the very first parents of the human race, according to what we have figured out over time, they would have been black.
Yeah. And they wouldn't have been Homo sapiens.
And Jesus Christ would definitely not have been white.
Dun, dun, dun.
Definitely not.
On page 327, he's changed to the topic of why stories are important and how they can be pure fiction, but they can still provide you with an identity that might make you feel like your life has meaning, which is valuable.
Yeah.
And every culture and every religion and every tribe has invented their own version of that throughout history. But ultimately, any story is wrong because it's a story.
Yeah.
It's inherently something that we made up.
Mm-hmm.
The universe just isn't a story, even though that's the easiest thing for our brains to comprehend.
The universe isn't a story.
No.
Our interpretation of our lives, our names, our memories, Those are stories that we tell
Yeah.
ourselves in order to try to make sense of.
We're the main characters
is.
of our own narrative.
Mhm.
So he asked the question, why do people believe in these fictions? And one reason is that their personal identity is built on the story, which is a
Yeah.
huge component of Mormonism.
Yeah.
It's your whole life.
Yeah, especially if you're born into it.
They're taught to believe the story from early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
They hear it from their parents, their teachers, their neighbors, and the general culture, long before they develop the intellectual and emotional independence necessary to question and verify such stories, which I feel like is especially what becomes so difficult to overcome when you're raised in the church.
Well, yeah, because part of that whole story is that you not only need to ask questions, you shouldn't. The thinking has been done.
Yeah.
And you just listen and obey.
It's funny because they do try
Obey.
and be like, oh, yeah, you can ask questions. There's nothing we
yeah.
hide.
Question
If
all
it's
you want,
true,
as long as you come up with this answer,
you can't
because
hurt
that's
it.
the only answer that is true. And if you want answers to questions, you read the scriptures.
Oh, yeah. And you'll get that burning in your bosom. And you will know. By the time their intellect matures, they are so heavily invested in the story that they are far more likely to use their intellect to rationalize the story
Yeah, there's a
than
lot
to
of that.
doubt it.
There's a lot of that.
That is just like, that's the equation.
Yeah.
You just rationalize.
Mental gymnastics.
Mental gymnastics.
Gold medalists. Mormons.
Yeah. Most people who go on identity quests are like children going treasure hunting. They find only what their parents have hidden for them in advance.
Ooh, that's good.
Isn't that just good stuff?
This guy's like
This guy
really
is
intelligent stuff.
really smart. Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, like, I was just thinking about this before we started. So much of the time, I just feel like I'm an alien that doesn't understand how life works.
Well, you are.
But like emerging from this sheltered existence
Yeah.
that I've tried really hard to break out of, but like now I have this job where I have coworkers that are like normal people and live
Yeah.
normal lives, and they're like scratching the surface of how naive I am, and I'm like, you guys have no idea.
Yeah. Excuse me, humans.
Humans? How do I use my life? I've been like following the Strange Planet comics.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's so great. It's so delightful. You would love it. I'll have to show it to you.
Okay.
But it's exactly like life as if aliens were living it and just
Oh, yeah.
describing things exactly as they objectively happen
Right.
rather than like
I can
the
see that.
emotional attachments that humans understand
Yeah.
that come into play. One more thing on this topic, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Page 333, he talks about how the element of suffering really reinforces your beliefs. We've talked about that before, how Mormons love the martyrdom.
The persecution narrative
Exactly.
is strong.
Yeah. He puts that nicely. He says, if you suffer because of your belief in God or in the nation, that does not prove that your beliefs are true. Maybe you are just paying the price of your gullibility. He makes so many stabs.
Ooh,
He's
that's a
amazing.
burn.
However, most people don't
Slammed
like
ya.
most people don't like to admit that they are fools. Consequently, the more they sacrifice for a particular belief, the stronger their faith becomes. This is the mysterious alchemy of sacrifice. In order to bring us under his power, the sacrificing priest need not give us anything. Neither rain, nor money, nor victory in war. Rather, he needs to take away something. Once he convinces us to make some painful sacrifice, we are trapped. Trapped. Because it becomes so painful to give up something that you've sacrificed so much for.
Yeah.
Once you've invested so much of yourself, you're enmeshed in it. And you don't want to admit that you just wasted all of that time and
I mean, imagine
emotion.
you're 40 or 50 years old
Yeah.
and somehow your shelf breaks.
Can you imagine Dad's shelf breaking?
No.
60 years of this?
I try to imagine what that would be like, but I truly can't.
I mean, the devastation.
To really, truly believe it and act it for that long, it would be I would have to imagine, very difficult to allow the possibility that you are wrong. But I would hope, and this is a question that it's a perfectly good question that I would want to ask him and anyone who truly believes things like this so much that they bet their life on it and their livelihood and their own minds. If it wasn't true, would you want to know that? That's the first question I really think you should ask yourself. If this wasn't true, would I want to know?
Because that'll tell you everything else.
Pretty much. Because if your answer is no, then it's pretty much a lost cause.
Exactly.
But then ask yourself, what if I was the Scientologist? Wouldn't I want to know that that was all bullshit?
It's so easy to say
if you were
standing
them,
outside of it.
If you were them, if your situations were reversed, and you were the one in Scientology wasting your life, and you know that that's not the truth, wouldn't you want to be able to be shown that you were wrong?
Yeah. And they try so hard, Mormons, to convince themselves that they're doing other people a favor.
Yeah.
By thinking about what it would be like to be in a non-believer's shoes and thinking, oh, it's my responsibility to save them because if I were them, I would want to know that I was wrong. But they cannot flip it back on themselves.
No. And I've gotten that answer asking me, is there any part of you that would say you don't know for sure whether or not that there's a God? Or that there's any part of you who could be convinced, any percentage of your intellect?
Mm-hmm. You now as an atheist.
And atheist is the generalized term. We could have a whole discussion about whether or not that's useful.
Right.
Because of the way believers use that word or think of that word.
Yeah.
But yes, I don't believe in a God.
Yeah.
Not Elohim, not Allah, not Thor or Zeus or any of them. But do I allow for even the most minute possibility that I could be wrong? Yes. But to the believer who says that they can't, that there's no way, there's not a chance that they're wrong.
It's like those Trump supporters.
Not quite, but
no, that's a good point because it's not fair for someone to expect other people to have the wherewithal to question their beliefs.
Yeah, and I've done,
but not do the same themselves.
I've done the searching and the seeking on both sides of the argument to come to the conclusion that there was nowhere near enough reason to believe that there is a heavenly Father.
Yeah.
That there is a creator who has a face and a name and a body. There's just no reason to believe that. There's only reasons to believe that we created him in our image and not the other way around.
That does seem to be the most logical explanation.
Mm-hmm. Using all the intellect that he would have given me if he was my creator. So, there you go.
There's a Mormon message by Elder Holland that I watched so many times on my mission. And missionaries love it because Elder Holland is the one that's known for being like the most emotionally persuasive in his general conference talks. The guy with the jowls.
Oh, yeah.
So in
those
this
jelly jowls.
jelly jowls. And when he gets fired up, people think that his emotion is very persuasive and convincing. And in this Mormon message, he's using this martyrdom, suffering, persecution narrative to solidify his argument that Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery and the founders of the church would not have wasted their time.
Uh-huh.
And the pioneers would not have crossed the plains in the winter in their bare feet, leaving footprints of blood.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets all like, they would not do that.
They would not do that.
He gets so emotional about it. And that kept running through my mind while I was reading about this self-sacrifice and how persuasive it is for people. Because they're just like, you think they died for nothing? You think that they would do that? You think our heroes are idiots?
Well, sir, first of all, in 1830, they had a lot of time to waste. Nothing but time. Religiosity was the norm. It's just which flavor do you choose? So yeah, people would make that sacrifice and make that trip if they believed the people who were leading them.
It's not that hard
They could still be
to
wrong.
fathom.
They could absolutely still be wrong.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were. And there's a lot of people that died that shouldn't have, that didn't need to.
No.
And
They also didn't need to cross in the winter.
no. And Brigham Young is a fucking idiot.
What an asshole.
He caused a lot of strife and death unnecessarily.
Oh, God. Thank you for letting me talk about all that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
The last point that he ends on is that meditation instead of fictions is the way that you're going to find a reality.
Nice.
And I thought that he did a really great job of wrapping that all up in a way that is actionable.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is something that we can all do, no matter
Yeah.
who you are.
And there's many ways to do it.
Yeah.
But what it all comes down to is, at least for brief periods in your life, looking inward instead of outward.
Yeah.
Thinking that it's out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Really all of everything that you understand, think, believe, question, it's all happening inside of you. So taking a moment to quiet down and tune in and kind of connecting to the notion that, I mean, if you look for the thinker of thoughts, the thinker isn't there. That's just the thoughts.
And where do they go when they're
Mhm.
gone?
Where did they come from?
They arose and they left.
It seems to me that there's very little of what's happening that is truly our own free will.
Yeah.
Or if there even is such a thing that we would call free will. That's a conversation for another time.
It is. Sometimes I feel like that's like some religious people would say we have like a crushing view of reality.
Mhm.
But actually, it's way more comforting to me
Mm-hmm.
to be able for us both to acknowledge that and be on the same page about the nature of existence as we actually experience it,
Mhm.
rather than trying to convince ourselves that some mystical thing is happening and we just don't understand it because God's
Rather-
ways are higher than our ways.
Rather than wishful thinking. It's really not going to do you a whole lot of good
No.
to get the most out of your life. Books like that, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, I think could be very helpful, as we have heard today.
Truly mind expanding. I just
Ultra
saved you
topical.
like 3
Dazzling.
weeks. You don't have to read it anymore. You know, you got it.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sister Lisa.
You're welcome, Brother Dan.
And thank you, dear listener, for being with us for another episode of Siblings in Zion.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.